This is the AM show. It's now time to bring you what's on the front pages and other details in the various newspapers. And so for the Daily Graphic, for example, on the front page you have AU at 60, silence the guns, armed conflicts, threat to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That's according to Professor Inchi Danso. And free SHS suppliers give NAFCO 2-week ultimatum. We will be getting into that story. And on the front of justice, ahead of vetting tomorrow, has company law sculpted Justice Gertrude Tokono for Ghana? And that's a question. And the story is captured on pages 10 and 39. And Chief Justice Enini Yeboah retires. He did so yesterday. And this one on mental health. Mental cases increasing, data reveals. And shortly, I will be joined by lawyer Bobby Banson, and we will be getting into the details of these stories. On the back page of the Daily Graphic, 3-story building collapses at Winneba. Thankfully, 5 escape unhurt. And it is almost, I think, about the 3rd building collapse in about a month we have recorded. Now, Stanbic Bank donates laptops to KNUST. Let's move to the Daily Guide. Front page, NPP guru storms Asin North for another by-election. That's on the front page of the Daily Guide. And Veep opens BOG's Cyber Security Center. And the president says, we will be disciplined with IMF deal. Much later on the show, for our first big story, we will be looking at the conditionalities which Professor Jampo has complained about. No we licensing, Supreme Court insists. And that particular verdict created a lot of buzz on social media. And there were even conversations about the different types of weed and whether cannabis, Indian hemp, and weed are all the same thing. Boga MP back in court for criminal trial. And the Boga MP here is James Dachikwesin. That's how the Daily Guide chooses to refer to him as. And you may recall that civil case, which was in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave a verdict on that, asking Parliament to expunge his name. There is the criminal angle also, and that is being heard in court. Kudus set to quit Ajax. Interesting. And UAE envoy to chair peace event in Kumasi. Back page of the Daily Guide. And on the front page of the Business Finder, BOG moves against cyber threats. And as Veep commissions robust infrastructure. IMF directs Bank of Ghana to scrap supply of cheap dollars to BDCs. Will that influence the cost of fuel? We will see. Green Ghana, Ministry Courts Oman Hines support. And the New Crusading Guide has that one we brought you as a first story, as its big story. JUSSAG embarks on strike. Also on the front page, Baumia commissions BOG cybersecurity infrastructure and arrest Akwemu Omanhene. That's from the Amwafro family, and they are petitioning the IGP. It will be interesting to see why, though. But let's go back to the Daily Graphic and see what the details are in there with some of the major stories that we have been highlighting. This one on the vetting of Chief Justice nominee Gertrude Tokono tomorrow. So pages 10 and 29. And the headline is a question. It says, has company law sculpted Justice Gertrude Tokono for Ghana? Well, so it's the reason why you have it on pages 10 and 39 is because it's a full story. So it's spread across that entire length of paper. And it's an interesting read, but the story is by Ace Anan Ankoma. And the story starts with a quote from Socrates. Listen courteously, answer wisely, consider soberly, and decide impartially. Ghana expects a lot more of a Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary, described by Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers 1778 as the least dangerous branch of government because it has no influence over either the sword or the purse. However, our Chief Justice is the fourth person in the constitutional order of precedence, is a member of every superior court, and chairs the Judicial Council and Rules of Court Committee. The Chief Justice also plays critical roles in the removal from office of the President, Superior Court judges, Auditor General, Commissioners and Deputy Commissioners of the Electoral Commission and SRAJ, and Governor of the Bank of Ghana. And so he goes on to talk about how the parliamentary approval process proves the Chief Justice nominee's judicial philosophy, background and all. It's quite an interesting read, but basically what it is that it is running you through the roles of a Chief Justice and juxtaposing that in many other things that, or many other cases that she has sat on. Right. So it comes along with some interesting photos of Her Ladyship Justice Gertrude Tokono. And like I said, some cases that she sat on there. But the writer is senior partner of the law firm of Bensi Enchil Lecha and Ankoma, and that's Ace Anan Ankoma. Hopefully, lawyer Bobby Banson will be joining us shortly. And it will be interesting to hear what he also makes of the happenings in our judiciary currently. But as you may be aware, the Chief Justice, Justice Enini Abua, has retired. Now, this one about mental health. Mental health is something that we all should pay attention to, and I'm glad it's on the front page of the Daily Graphic. But the story is captured on page 16. And it reads, it's a story by Augustina Teria. Schizophrenia, a mental health disorder, is on the rise in the country, with 8,446 people presenting with the condition as at the end of March this year. Now, these are people who have gone to health facilities, so imagine the others. From 19,856 persons who presented for help with the condition in 2020, the cases increased to 20,755 in 2021 and 24,790 in 2022. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder characterized by persistent psychotic symptoms such as auditory and or visual hallucinations, delusional thinking, disassociation from reality, and disorganized thoughts and behavior. It usually begins to manifest when the patients are in their early 20s, although in rare cases, symptoms can show in early childhood. So, yes, what the doctors recommend, right? Just like how you visit the hospital probably twice a year, once a year to get your health checked, your heart, you do your cardio, you check your blood, you check for the presence of, you know, other things that may signal a certain disease or a certain condition with an organ. Doctors recommend that you also go check your mental health. It is important. And in most of the cases, early detection is always the best. And so you just want to keep that on the fore as well and not allow your mental health to get in a worse state. Well, we've been joined by lawyer Bobby Banson via phone. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us this morning. So on the front page of the Daily Graphic, I was just referring to that vetting tomorrow of Her Ladyship Justice Gertrude Tokono, and she is the President's nominee as the next Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana. And lawyer Ace Ananankoma has quite a lengthy piece on her and the cases she sat on and all that. But what is your impression of Her Ladyship, and what are your expectations, that is if she's approved, of her contribution to the judiciary?
And thanks for the opportunity. Good morning to your viewers and listeners. I think that most lawyers who have practiced for some time and have experienced work as a Justice of the Superior Court will attest to her fact, her disposition to her getting things done and getting things done the way they should be done. I think that she comes across as someone who is stern in her beliefs or her conviction, and then will ensure that the way she knows things must be done, how she will get it done. I do not expect anything less than building upon the legacies of all the Chief Justices in recent times that I have experienced in the course of my work as a legal practitioner, and make justice delivery system more accessible to a lot of persons. You will notice that at least since the time of Justice Sofia Kufu, there have been attempts to open more courts in various parts of the country. That attempt was also continued by the Justice Mimi Aboa, and so I expect that would also be continued by Justice Sokono. You would also see that at least there have been some reforms in the various administrative procedures. We've had under the commercial courts coming in, the general divisions of the court to ensure that there is speedy administration of justice in those matters. You'd also notice that a lot of directions, administrative directions have been issued over time to ensure that the court officers do their work in the best possible manner. So we expect that over time, since there has been an intentional attempt, we could see that it's very intentional to make justice delivery system more accessible and more efficient, that legacy would be built on by Justice Sokono.
Well, interesting days ahead. Lawyer Bobby Banson, there's also a story, right, that generated some discussions on social media and had to do with the Supreme Court's insistence on no-we licensing. And this story is in the Daily Guide, written by Jibril Abdul Razak. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed its decision to declare as unconstitutional a section of the Narcotic Control Commission Act 2020 Act 1019, which permitted the issuance of license to an institution to cultivate a small amount of cannabis in Ghana for industrial and medicinal use. This was after the court, presided over by Justice Jones Doche, in a 5-4 majority, dismissed a motion for review filed by the Attorney General, challenging the court's original decision that the law was unconstitutionally passed by Parliament. The Supreme Court in July 2022, in its decision on a case filed by private citizen Iziam Manan against the Attorney General, held that Section 4.3 of the Narcotics Control Commission Act 2020 Act 1019, which permitted the issuance of the special license, contravened Article 106 2A, B5 and 6 thereof of the 1992 Constitution, which stipulates the processes a bill must go through before it is passed into law by Parliament. Section 4.3 of Act 1019 states that the Minister, on the recommendation of the Commission, may grant a license for the cultivation of cannabis, popularly referred to as weed in Ghana, which is not more than 0.3% THC content on dry weight basis for industrial purposes, for obtaining fiber or seed for medicinal purposes. Now, the court consequently declared Section 4.3 of the Narcotics Control Commission Act null, void, and of no effect, and subsequently struck it out as unconstitutional because it is a violation of Article 106 of the 1992 Constitution. Now, let me just quickly move on to what the Attorney General's argument was. Now, the Attorney General, Godfrey Yeboah-Dame, in a review motion, argued the original 7-member panel committed an error of law resulting in a substantial miscarriage of justice. He said it is only at the beginning of the process that there must be a memorandum. Mr. Dame argued that the memorandum anticipated a situation where Parliament could make exceptions to laws allowing such cultivation. He therefore urged the court to be very concerned about the undue curtailment of Parliament's legislative powers, adding that at the bedrock of the country's constitution is the concept of separation of powers. The motion was opposed by Efiba Amehia, counsel for Mr. Manan, who argued that no miscarriage of justice had been occasioned. She added that at the time the memorandum was being tabled before Parliament, the amendment complained of was not added to the law, that the cultivation of weed was going to be allowed. The court, in a 5-4 majority decision, ruled that the review threshold of the court was not met, and the motion was subsequently dismissed. Justice Jones Duche and Justices Prof. Ni Ashikote, Mariama Owusu, Professor Henrietta Mensah Bonsu, and Yoni Kulendi formed the majority, while Justices Avril Lovelace Johnson, Amadou Tanko, Samuel Esiedu, and George Kumsen formed the minority. I don't know what you make of this very interesting play out here in the Supreme Court. And at the heart of this is the separation of powers issue that the Attorney General raises. I don't know what you make of this, Lawyer Bobby Banson.
Well, the ruling yesterday by the Supreme Court was not necessarily on the merits of the case that had been tabled before them and decided in July 2022 last year. So what happened yesterday was a decision on a review application. Now, the review application is an application that is made to the Supreme Court to demonstrate, the applicant ought to demonstrate that the earlier decision by the Supreme Court, there was a grave error of law apparent on the face of the judgment, which the Supreme Court ought now to set aside. And so the threshold for a review application is that you must demonstrate that the decision by the court, the same Supreme Court, they did not consider legal prescriptions, or there was an omission of an application of a very sacrosanct judicial principle, which had resulted in a miscarriage of justice. So it is not an opportunity for the party to re-argue his case. And so it is not as if they re-heard the entire case. That is why the review application is a very technical procedure, that unless you're able to demonstrate that, for example, there's an act of parliament that the Supreme Court did not consider, or there is an evidence that he had already submitted that the Supreme Court did not consider, it's very difficult for the Supreme Court to review its previous decision. And so yesterday, the Supreme Court did not go to the merits of the case again. They did not sort of rehear the entire argument. They only looked at whether or not the decision that they made earlier, there was grave error on it. And, you know, like the practice, if the original decision was heard by 7 members of the panel, with the review application, 2 other members would be added so that they arrive at that decision. And so I was not surprised when they dismissed the application for review, because they had made up their mind that they were not going to allow, or they were going to declare that, or they had decided, rather, majority had decided that they were going to declare that provision unconstitutional. And so it would have been difficult for you to be able to, the applicant, which is the Attorney General, to be able to demonstrate that there were exceptional circumstances warranted by a grave error, either on omission of a particular statute or application of it, that will require them to have a second look at that decision. Be that as it may, and again, this is for the discourse, you see, this review application was filed by the Attorney General, and yet the Supreme Court decided against it. And so, even though we are talking about separation of powers of the legislature, I think the independence of the judiciary has further been exemplified by their decision not to agree with the government, which is represented by the Attorney General, on such an important government policy. We all know how some members of the ruling government really advocated for the passage of this act, and yet the Supreme Court has taken a different view. And so those who always make the argument that the Supreme Court in particular, the judiciary, is in bed with any government at any point in time, should be having a rethink of that position. And then look at this instance. This is a huge policy by the government, and yet the Supreme Court has disagreed with them on 2 occasions. And so, I mean, it is their decision. Like I said, at this stage, it wasn't whether or not that provision in the Narcotics Control Act amendment was constitutional or not. Yesterday, that wasn't what they decided.
Right.
They decided whether their earlier decision, there was error apparent on the face of it, which has led to a miscarriage of justice.
But, I mean, you are right when you say that it is an indication of the independence of the judiciary when a government policy or a case brought by the Attorney General is, like you say, in people's estimation, not just looked at as or rubber stamped, right? But does it matter or does it change anything, the 5-4? So you have 5 on the majority, 4 in the minority. Does that change anything? Even though the majority got the day, I'm looking at the numbers specifically.
At the end of the day, it's the majority. You don't always expect that it to be 7-0 or 9-0. That's what I'm saying, that the judges, they do conference. If they agree on a particular position, they are allowed to express it. If they do not agree on a particular position, they are allowed to express it. So it is not as if they are whipped into line by taking on steam forces or on steam hands, as sometimes people perceive. That they are whipped into line so that they all take a particular decision or they all throw a certain line. This is not the case. You see 4 members deciding that they do not agree with what their colleagues on the same bench, in the same room. Imagine them having conference at a round table and discussing. Those who are in the minority must try and convince those in the majority to join them and vice versa. If that does not happen, then the divide must still remain, and when they appear at the plenary of the court, they will have to now announce that unfortunately it is not a unanimous decision, it is 5-4. These are the basis of the majority decision. These are the basis of the decision of the minority.
Interesting. I was just wondering if, for those who make the argument of whether or not this is unanimous and the signal that you were trying to hint at about a certain level of independence. That's why I brought in the numbers. But there's more happening in the country besides that. There's the issue of the IMF directing the BOG to scrap supply of cheap dollars to bulk oil distribution companies. And we know how over the years in this country, lawyer, we try to intervene, we try to help in mitigating things one way or the other so that we don't have a situation in this particular instance in terms of fuel, having to pay too much because the BDCs may not be able to transfer the cost of their running their business onto the consuming public. There are also concerns about the IMF conditionalities. I don't know if you've gone through the document and what your thinking also is about it. Professor Jampo, for example, thinks that, the document does not make provision, for example, for dealing with issues of corruption and leakages. What are your thoughts?
Bernice, we have to face Section 5. We cannot eat our cake as a country or as citizens and have it. How we got to IMF, that discussion, we've gone past it. We are there. Whether we like it, whether we don't like it, whether it's shameful, whether it's not shameful, whether it's caused by mismanagement, whatever we may ascribe as the reasons why we are there. Now, what is the benefit of going to IMF? I am not an economist, so I would not want to speak as if I know better than those that actually deal with this matter. As a layman, my view was that going to IMF will give us some form of credibility internationally to be able to source for more funds or go back to the international market. Now, when you go to IMF, definitely, like we all knew, they are going to come with the conditions. Now, these conditions, would they, in the long run, if we abide by them, put our economy on a certain stable foot or a certain level pedestal to be able to move the country forward? I know a lot of, because you see, our problem, including me as a citizen, we are used to a lot of freebies, and we threaten the political establishment with the fact that if they take away the freebies we've enjoyed since independence, we are not going to vote for them. And so they almost always kowtow to these threats, and then we come back to that same center.
But Lawyer Banson, this is about the availability, right? So for many of the bulk oil distribution companies, they're not able to get dollars in the open market at affordable rates. And what that will mean is that we will have to pay for more. So that's why the Bank of Ghana decided to come up with a certain program that allows for them to get it at a certain rate so that we don't end up paying so much at the pumps. Does that also account or amount to a freebie for you?
Well, what I'm saying, yes, but I'm not necessarily saying that the policy or those conditions are perfect. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that I would say it's freebie, but of course, it seems to me that it's at a discounted rate because you said that the cost that they get in open market is definitely more than the DOD is offering them or offers to them. And that eventually, because they buy it at a higher amount, it will affect their cost factor, which then they will pass on to the consumer. Now, what is the other side? DOD does not make any profit from their operations, except the one that will affect, or their operations affect the economy as a whole. And so, if they are giving dollars to a certain sector of the economy at a discounted rate, it means somebody is paying for it somewhere. Because where would they get the difference from? If on the open market the cost is more, and then the DOD is offering to you less, it means the difference is a loss that somebody is paying for. Is it the government? No, because the government doesn't pay for anything except the citizen. So eventually, whatever difference that the DOD is losing because they are offering these dollars to the bulk oil distributors at a certain rate, that difference is being paid for by you and I in another form. Either we are going for loan to pay for it, which will come back to us, or we are paying for it by our taxes. So I do not know the full extent of those machinations and how they work, but I think that it's a matter of communication. If there is serious open communication or discussions or engagement between the bulk oil distributors, the DOD, the public is educated, we may be able to understand fully the implications of all these measures. And in the long term, because for me that is my opinion, that in the long term, these things should be able to benefit us. We should stop doing like the stopgap measures, which we've been doing since independence, and after 20 years, or 10 years, we cannot support it anymore. We have to go to IMF. So those are my preliminary observations. Like I said, I am not an economist, and so I will not know the exact details. On this issue, I'm purely speaking as a layperson.
Right, and closely linked to that story is another in the Daily Guide on page 6, a story by Ernest Kofi-Edu, in which the president is saying that his government will be disciplined with the IMF deal. And he was speaking in an interview at the Qatar Economic Forum in Doha yesterday. He stated that his government would work quickly to bring the fiscal deficit, which is mandated by law to be at 5%, to a reasonable level, conceding that it was already far beyond the mark. Quote, rationalization of our expenditure, rationalization of government expenditure is something that we've given assurance. Domestic revenue mobilization is absolutely critical for us, and already we are seeing signs. He stated that Ghana has prepared itself to re-enter the international market, which had been a source of funding for the country during the first 3 or 4 years of his government, but added that the government was not in a hurry to do so. It always is the case, well, most of the time, isn't it, that we successfully implement our IMF deals, and that's because there always is a quote-unquote certain big brother, a certain third eye watching or cross-checking that we are sticking to the agreement, to what we have agreed to do. The bigger conversation, I guess, is whether or not we'll be able to carry that level of discipline when we exit an IMF deal, isn't it?
Yes, that was by whether or not to be able to make that discipline. And that is what I think.
Sorry, lawyer Banson, your line is breaking.
Is it better?
Is it possible to reposition yourself, please?
Yes, Bernice. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's much better.
Okay. So it's that question that we've all been asking ourselves every time we come to that program. whether we'll be disciplined enough to maintain the fiscal policies that we introduce into our economy or our governance structure by virtue of the IMF program that give us that stability that we want. And that is why I think that mostly the political establishment, they always want to seek favor from us by giving us things or spending beyond their means. I understand that corruption is the major key, and for me, that is more important than any other thing in this discussion. But if the political establishment are not corrupt by themselves, it's us who cause them. Who accommodates the corruption, encourage, and so we must also be disciplined in that respect. And we pray that the class, and in this case the MPP government, will really, really, really be disciplined and stop those expenditures that do not directly or indirectly benefit the economy. Because you remember how they said they will not go to IMF once we put
Oh, too bad, Lawyer Banson. I'm losing you again. I hope you can hear me, though. There are a couple of stories I would like to take your view on, and then we'll wrap it up here on the News Review segment. JUSSAG has embarked on a strike, the Judicial Service Staff Association of Ghana. I'm just wondering how that affects your work as a lawyer and what your thoughts are. They have been hinting at this for some time. They didn't just get up and embark on the strike, but they have accused government of consistent dishonesty in attending to their conditions of service and other emolument owed members. The association says its proposals to government on the implementation of the approved cost of living allowance for members were not urgently attended to.
Well, I read their release, and I was very touched that they've been treated like this all these years. Well, as a lawyer, they've read that the drivers shouldn't even drive the judges to work. And so it means that there's nothing that could be done. They've asked that the court premises should not be opened by their members. The security people would be there to ensure that there is safety of the assets of the installations of the judiciary, but it should not be open to the court. If people have important matters that have already been scheduled to be heard today, it means that it cannot come off. As if you are a private practitioner who goes to court, it means that you cannot go to court. And so in the long run, it will affect justice delivery system, because you know what we say, justice denied, delayed is justice denied.
Yes.
If there are urgent matters that ought to have been heard today, it will not come off. And the timing too is very interesting, because just when the former chief justice was leaving office, and they've embarked on this strike. So I can imagine how tomorrow, during the election of the incoming, the nominee, it will really feature. And I hope the government takes the necessary steps to avert this situation and restore or get them to go to work, so that every person that is seeking that justice would have access to it.
It'll be interesting to see if that intervention will be successful. I don't know. I don't know what it will look like, but we will be keeping our eyes on this particular strike and update you. So there's this one on transforming TVET. Technical education is very important, and this government has committed quite a lot to see that it is successful. Penelope Brooke Thompson is a founder of the African Center for Technical Training. She's been awarded an extraordinary leader transforming a field by an orthodox philanthropy, and it's all because of TVET. In fact, I have hosted many people. I've hosted Madam Swanika. I've hosted people who are interested in seeing that our technical education is really focused. People do not discriminate against people who opt for technical education, because of its importance and a contribution to our development. You are in a field which is, quite not under TVET per se, but do you have any skill that you wish you had, honed, or you wished you had gotten some level of education to specialize in, or maybe even do on the side? And what are your general thoughts about technical and vocational education in the country?
I think that it's sad that as a country, in a long time, we have neglected that sort of work. You notice that years ago, we used to have what we call life skills in the syllabus. I don't know if you during your time in junior high or primary school, you had that as part of the syllabus. But in the life skills subject, we were taught basic technical skills like even sewing,
right,
things like that. But it's disappeared from our syllabus. It is not everybody that would be interested, or should I say blessed, the capacity to be able to do what is called the white collar job, formal jobs. And so if as a country we do not intentionally develop or provide a structure where these other skills would be developed, then we cannot have a very balanced economy. So that what it means is that those who have acquired these skills, and I think they have a school on the boundary road, where sometimes when they close, see the students that are seeking to access or seeking to be trained in this department. I did some work for some time for one of the designs at the school, and it was interesting how it's very detailed. People who are there are not there mainly because they cannot afford or they do not have the capacity for formal training. Sometimes people are there because that is their passion.
Right.
That is their passion. All their life, let's say they want to be engineers, but their form of engineering would be, say, machine work. It doesn't mean that they are less able to do what a doctor is able to do. They've just chosen that path. And if the country does not give them the platform to sharpen their skills, encourage them, and because those markets are always there. If you go to school, you learn banking and finance, you have to be employed by a bank most of the time. But when you go to school and you are trained as an auto mechanic, the market is always there because people keep buying cars. People are manufacturing cars in Ghana now. They are assembling it. And so if we have more people skilled and trained and certified, we can even export them because there are other countries that do not have this structure that we need here. And so I'm happy, at least over time, I see a conscious effort by the Minister of Education to develop this aspect of the educational system, and I hope that it is continuing.
That's TVET and STEM. I'm just curious if your second love is auto mechanics. Since you cited us as an example, I'm just wondering, or it has been law for you from the beginning.
Well, if I had not done law, probably I would have gone into acting.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I appreciate your time this morning, Lawyer Bobby Banson, there helping us with the news review. And, well, maybe if someone has an acting job for a lawyer, if you want to...
Well, I'm ready to audition.
Okay, all right, okay. That's good. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, Lawyer Bobby Banson there. You're watching the AM show with me, Bernice, Abu-Baidoo, Lansah. Up next, we've got AM Sports for you. And then after that, we will be bringing you our big stories to stay.